Good afternoon. And I'll introduce myself. My name is Glenn Faniff. This is a follow-up on the previous video series. I would say number 3. I just finished with taxpayer rights, and I'm going to go into the interview process. And it can be lengthy. It can be lengthy at times, depending on the type of information that we're discussing here. And so we're going to just dive into it. And myself, what I'll do is I'll go into something. It's a personal interview, and then I'll do a business interview. And I have a template. I usually write everything out and stuff, and I just follow it because every examiner's different. They have their own steps that they do things. So at the end of the day, they're collecting information. They're doing an investigation to see if you're an honest steward of your taxes. And I start with the basic information on the personal interview. We're talking your phone number, all your phone numbers. If you have a power of attorney, okay, what their phone number is. Usually on the call, if it's a call or if it's in office or if I'm at the site location, you might have someone there and stuff, and I can get that information. And one thing I should quickly talk about, if I'm going through the interview, and I'll let them know if it's the taxpayer. If any time that you feel uncomfortable, you don't want to go any further, you can request representation. I'll just stop whatever I'm doing, and I'll give you a Form 2848, which is basically your form to get representation. If you're married, well, you have to fill out a form, and your wife would have to fill out a form. And both sign it, because it has to be individual and stuff, and go from there. And then from there, I'll and this is on the person, I'll ask about your employment. If you're a W-2 wage earner, or maybe you're self-employed, maybe you're retired, whatever. I'll need that your employer, your occupation. I'll check your filing status, make sure what your current filing status is. Maybe things do change. I'll pretty much have a little checkbox, make sure I've gone over the Privacy Act notice, the appeals rights. I'll ask you about the year in question, if you filed an amended return. Let's see. I pretty much will try to explain to the taxpayer that, as we're going through this, I'm going to want a mutual commitment date when we can expect to wrap up the audit. That way we're pretty much on the same page. The thing's not going on forever. There's timetables, but I understand audit can take up a lot of people's lives and stuff. So try to hammer out a date, a reasonable date in order to finish this. I'll talk about the returns that you refile. You might file the 1040. You might have a corporate return, a partnership. Maybe you have a trust. Whatever I'll ask about the returns that you're filing. Certain things I might ask. I might ask if you have any household help, if you file any excise tax or any other things, any other forms you might have. I will get a little background information if you didn't complete the return on who completed the return. I'll ask if you've been audited before, or if you've been contacted by the IRS before. Just make sure it's not a repetitive audit, okay? I'll ask you if you have any errors or admissions on the tax return that you want to disclose at this time. And then from there, we go into the income probe, or you can call it an income inquiry. And I'm gonna jump into this. I'm gonna hammer through this pretty quick because there's like about 20 items on here, and I'm going to explain a little afterwards what's going on here. So I'm going to ask if you have any interest, dividend income, sale of assets, if you sold anything. Do you have any other job income? So you might be a W-2 wage earner, but you might have another job on the side, or you just 1099, non-employee compensation. So you're not an employee per se, but you should be able to figure that out. Investment, any investment income, any tip income. I'm just gonna go through the categories, and you can look them up if you have to. Commission income. any type of hobby income, any rent or royalty income, any alimony income, any partnership income, any type of sick pay, any child support, any prizes, awards, bonuses, gambling lottery income, any insurance, like if you had any proceeds from an insurance if you were in an accident, any estate or trust income, state and local tax refunds, employer reimbursement. So let's say you go out and you drive 100 miles for your employer, you use your car and they reimburse you miles, employer reimbursement. Any income from gifts, inheritance, any scholarship, fellowship, or grant income. Loan, I usually throw in loan income, and I pretty much have to explain a little more. So like, let's say you loaned some money out to somebody and they're paying you back with interest, and I'd want to know about that. Any Social Security income, any welfare, any unemployment compensation, veterans benefits, military allowance, any income from foreign banks, any income from pensions, annuities, any profit sharing, IRA Q distributions, and then I'll actually at the end of the interview, I'll just at the end of this question say, is there any other sources of income that I didn't cover that you had income from? And what's interesting about this, I might explain this a little later, but they have this. The IRS has this program. I think this thing's from the Stone Age, but you know what? It works, and it's really good. And I'm imagining that someone's keying in this information and stuff, because it's like the old green screen computers, and they call it IDRS. And you put in the taxpayer's information, and depending on the command code that you use, it'll pull up pretty much all the income that was reported for the year. And so, as an examiner, what we do, one of our checks when we do this, when we're doing we call it the pre-audit phase, which I'll explain some other time, we'll match. I'll have this stuff and I'll match to see if it actually, what was reported in this software program was actually on the return. And then I'm going to see if it also matches what you're talking about on the interview. It's just one of my checks. Okay? So I'm done. I'm pretty much done with that section. Then I'll ask something about bartering. You know what? Especially with inflation and stuff, bartering could be big. You know what I mean? We'll be asking, and I found out that there was, I wasn't really aware that there are some websites that have bartering, and it's a big thing. And I'll ask some questions about that. I'll ask about if you have any foreign accounts or trusts. Okay. I'll ask if you travel out of the country. And if you do, how you pay your expenses while you're traveling, and if you have any banks outside of the country. I'll go into exemptions. I'll briefly ask it about, age or blind exemption, and I'll also look to see if you have any. I'll talk about dependents, and that's it for the personal interview, and that's a lot. We're going to talk about the business. I'm gonna kind of go through quickly on that one, because this would take a long time too, depending on the type of business. And so we're going to start on the business interview now. Okay. On the business interview, I'll pretty much just get some basic information. I'll ask about the name, the location, and I'll say, hey, tell me about your business. What do you do? What do you make? What do you sell? Just get some information on that. How long you been in business? How many years? Months? How many employees you have? Full-time, part-time? How do you pay your employees? Are they 1099? Are they contract employees? Are they W-2s? Are they issues? Do you issue 1099s? Do you issue Form 940, 941s? Have they been filed? I'll ask how you pay yourself. Do you pay yourself? How do you do that? I'll ask the type of, the accounting method, if it's a cash or accrual, or if there's a hybrid method. Usually I'll have it checked off on the return, but I'll still have to verify it. Did you have a change in accounting method? Who's the bookkeeper? Then I'll talk about if you have any cash on hand. Do you have any cash on hand? Some people they have cash, and that's how they conduct their business. They don't believe in banks. And it sometimes will explain if things are upside down in your business, and you show me your bank accounts and there's money in there, and go, oh well, I got some money over here. Okay, and then I'll ask about your banks. I want to know about your banks, and more likely, depending on the type of audit, or if it's a revenue agent, well, they're always going to want the bank statements. Period. That's it. They're going to do a bank deposit analysis on that, so they're going to want the banks, and they'll find out. I mean, they're pretty good. They can find out your banks and stuff. I mean, anyways, so we ask about your banks. Then I'll ask who makes the deposits. Okay, how often are they made? Do you maintain deposit slips? It's kind of like everyone's electronics. I don't really. That's the big deal and stuff. But still, how do you keep track of your deposits? I mean, you'll say, oh, everything's electronic, or it's on a statement, and that'll be that. I'll ask if you have a safety deposit box, okay, and what the contents are, where it's located. Then I'll briefly talk about the expenses. Are the business and personal expenses kept separately? I mean, do you have a separate bank account for the business, and a separate bank account for your personal expenses, or are they all commingled? Do you mix everything together? And if they're commingled, how do you tell one from the other? I mean, how do you keep your records? Are all business receipts deposited? Do you deposit the money that you earn from each day? Okay. And where are they deposited? Are they deposited in the business account, or are they deposited in the personal account? How do you pay your expenses? Cash, credit card, check, Cash App. How you paying your business expenses? Then I'll ask. So how did you determine gross? If this is on the business, how did you determine gross receipts? How did you determine how much you made? And most people, some people just say, well, you know what? I make all of my deposits in the bank. I total all my deposits for the year, and that's how I came up with my gross receipts. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense. And everybody has. But if you have a credit card, however you do it, I get something from the vendor. At PayPal, I have all my gross receipts, and then I have my bank gross deposits, and I total them up, and that's how I come up with my gross receipts. And so everyone has their own way to do it. I might ask how a sale or transactions are recorded, and pretty much like you walk into a restaurant and you buy breakfast, it comes up in the cash register, versus I've walked into some places and all they do is they pay with cash and everything's handled in cash, and I'm like, well, then how are you recording this? And they got the little thing that they write, the receipt that they write breakfast on, and they just keep it that way. It's like, okay, it works. Let's see here. And then I might, if it's really like something like that, a restaurant or something like that, or something that's really fast paced, I'll explain, describe a typical day. So I understand, the waitresses come in, blah, 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 they take the orders. But I'm really trying to get an idea of how everything's operating, but also how the owner is managing the business and how they're keeping track of the records. How are they recording the expenses? How are they recording the income that's coming in? How are your controls? Because controls are a big thing. Do you have control over your funds and your assets and everything? That's a big thing. Then I'll ask. We'll talk about your purchases. So let's say you do have an inventory. Let's say it is a restaurant and you have 100 dozen eggs in the bag. Well, do you take any of that out for personal use? And that's just a hypothetical question, but it's a small thing, but it'll be it's an example I'm using it. Do you use any of your purchases for personal use? And do you account for that? Let's see. And do you use any cash disbursements for purchases? So are you paying things with cash? Let's see. I'll ask about any related transactions, and that basically means are there any transactions between yourself and any relatives or related parties. Then I'll talk about I'll talk about inventory if you have an inventory and stuff. If the method that you use for your inventory, how you valuing your goods. So there'll be a section on that if it's even applicable to you. Then I'll get into loans, notes, and mortgages, and I'll want to know about any loans, notes, or mortgages that are basically used for the business and stuff that you took out and stuff. And if you took a loan on, it could be a source of cash flow. It might even explain the situation. So that's, it'll also show if you have a mortgage payment, cover some of the expenses. Then I'll ask about capital assets, major pieces of equipment that you might have had, like restaurant or bakery. Maybe you bought a big mixer, okay, or maybe you sold the item. When did you buy it? When did you sell it? What was the price? And when you acquired it, what was the cost? Simple questions. Then we get into the internet business activity. Now that's interesting because everything is on the internet, and me being a dinosaur, I've learned a lot and stuff. And I will go over this in another video because there's a whole thing on the internet activity. And I really don't think everything's being covered. They're good. And actually, some of these new examiners that are coming on, they know. They got their hand in the cookie jar. They know what's going on there. So much better than me. They know about all these cash apps and all this. And me, I am a dinosaur. I'm more apt to use cash and all this, but it didn't matter. I'm doing an examination. I'm looking at your bank statements, and I'm looking at these cash apps. I'm like, oh, you got some online transactions going on here. And then let's talk about, and then I'll go on, I'll do some research, I'll check to see if you have a website, and I'll do some research on it in my pre-audit, but then I'll ask you about your website and see what you have to say, and then I'll be checking that out. And I'll ask if you conduct any business online. And then at the tail end of my business interview, I'll have some tailored questions, specifically to the issues that are under examination. And, let's say it is the business and you got office expenses. I'll say, well, what were the office expenses? Do you got the receipts? And show me your proof of purchase, check, credit card, statement, whatever. And what's the purpose of these office expenses? What are you doing in the office that, and it has to pretty much have to be I said LUQ before, large, unusual, and questionable item for me to even be asking this, that even come up. And I don't know, maybe you bought a major purchase and it's something that you expensed and they call it capitalized. It's something that you expensed, but let's say it was a new computer, and I believe on a depreciation table, or the way you expense it, is over a 3-year period. I could be wrong. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. And you wrote the whole thing off. Well, no. And I'll just say, well, we have to make an adjustment. You can't write that whole thing off. You get the useful life on that computer, I believe, it's either 3 or 5 years. And I'll look up on the depreciation table, and I'll say, well, this is what you get. And there's a rate, and I'll apply it, and I'll make an adjustment, and that'll be that. And so, so depending on the issue, that we'll talk, the examiner will delve into the issues, dive into the issues, and discuss them further and stuff. And then that's pretty much, we'll hammer out a mutual commitment date at the tail end of it, and that will pretty much be it. And that's pretty much from a tax compliance officer standpoint. Now, if I'm a revenue agent, more than likely I've made arrangements to come down to your business. I'll ask for a location where I can maybe sit close to the books and records and do my examination. And I'll also do a walkthrough, which means I'll look at your business just to see how it's operating. And some of these things can be eye-opening because, I mean, let's say you're a taxi company, or let's say you're a delivery company. And yeah, I got 3 vans, blah 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 blah, and I come in there, and you get 6 vans, and I'm like, what's going on with that? You know, and I'll sit there and I was like, oh, and he's got, and you know, you can pretty much what you say on paper and what you're actually doing. You know, things might not be as they appear, and so that's other thing to be also aware of or cognizant of. So besides that, that's it. I mean, this is 21 minutes. I'll set up another video to probably talk about maybe some of the issues and stuff and where things go from after this point. And that's it from now. Take care.